Around 2004, thieves drove down to a remote village targeting a dilapidated temple in southern India. They stole a couple of bronze idols with little effort. Later, they returned and stole few more idols until all the bronze idols were gone.
These statues, they're absolutely priceless, and they've all been plundered and stolen right from under our noses.
It wasn't in the psyche of people that they could be looted because they are considered so sacred. They are central to the faith system of the community. For them, gods are considered a living entity.
A single village will have one idol that they have worshipped for 2,000 years, and now they worship an empty pedestal, or they worship a photograph.
Most of the stolen idols popped up in big museums across the world, some art galleries, and some private collectors.
This was not some random theft. This was an organized looting on an industrial scale where the best of Indian art was priced and then smuggled out of India.
The mastermind became one of the most prolific commodity smugglers in US law enforcement history. Even today, when you talk to officials involved in that case, they'll tell you that they're not sure of the true extent of loot taken from India.
When we opened up the first storage facility and saw tens of millions of dollars of looted idols piled on top of each other, I'll confess a little part of me died inside.
My day job is in shipping. I've been in the shipping industry for the last 34 years. My second job, that is basically hunting down stolen antiquities.
Is it here?
It's here. India is losing about 10,000 major works of art every decade. That's about 1,000 a year. So our goal is to bring back artifacts that have been smuggled out of the country back to India. I hail from a small village south of Chennai, where my great-grandfathers were technically headmen, and there are small temples built by them there. So you could say that a little bit of temple building was in the blood. I had built up my own portfolio of lesser-known ruined temples within India. And a lot of friends got together and said, why don't you share what you have on a public platform? So I started writing it out in Google groups and Yahoo forums. And that led me to cast a net for like-minded friends out in the world who had similar interests and ideas.
I would say the vast majority of ancient art that you see in American museums was stolen at some point. The question is really when. A lot of the objects on display were stolen since World War II and would be considered kind of part of the contemporary black market in antiquities. In the absence of really dedicated law enforcement in the illicit antiquities trade, different people started using the internet to connect across international lines and compare notes on what they were seeing about the black market. So I had a blog called Chasing Aphrodite, Vijay had a blog called Poetry in Stone. We were writing about these issues from different points of view, but found that our worlds overlapped substantially and that we were actually writing about two different ends of the same criminal network. So anytime I would have a new case that I was investigating, I would tweet about it and ask for help and solicit volunteers to help me track down objects at museums around the world. Vijay similarly has used a really powerful social network.
Tamil Nadu has, let's say, 43 to 47,000 temples. These bronzes and the stone sculptures have survived for 1,000 years. But when we went to some of these sites, we realized that what should have been there were not there. Obviously, there was rampant looting happening very visibly. And that's the point that we started looking at Indian art that was coming into the markets in Europe and America on a very regular basis.
I would say that it is naive to think that most museums do not have at least some stolen artifacts. But in many cases, the museums couldn't have known when they acquired it, it was stolen. Not only would the pieces themselves be cleaned, but also they would get good appearing provenance, bills of sale, and the like. There are names that are radioactive. If you walk into a museum and you see a curatorial card and one of these names is on that list, chances are it's probably stolen and we just haven't gotten to it yet.
In every Shiva temple in India, you can see the dancing Shiva idol, Nataraja. Nata means dance and the Raja is called as a king. So this is king of dance. So the dance represents the source of all the movements within the universe. And foreigners also love this idol because it has a symbolic representation of the cosmos and also because it is very beautiful.
These statues, they are central to the faith system of the community. They believe that those gods have powers and they have genuine faith that those prayers would be listened to by the gods.
So what typically happens is you have a very remote, unguarded temple. Maybe there's one or two idols in there of value. But the people who live in that area are unaware that they could sell for $1 or $2 or $3 or more million US dollars. And the smugglers prey on that ignorance.
So both these temples had amazing bronzes, the Suttamali temple and the Shriparandan temple.
Including a 4-foot tall dancing Shiva. The smugglers met at an upscale hotel in Chennai and they exchanged photographs of the targets.
That was quite unique. You don't get to see early bronzes of this vintage all set in one temple.
These two petty criminals, they targeted one after the other temple and they broke the locks. And they load the stolen idols in a truck and they use some glue to fix the lock so that without alarming the villager, they can come back again and again.
And they did not even leave one bronze behind.
So in 2007, Indian authorities got a tip of a shipment of stolen idols being taken to the US and they tipped off the US customs. They went on and seized the container which possessed hordes of antique idols and statues.
When customs inspects a crate and finds illicit antiquities inside, the dealer is faced with a choice. They can claim the crate and go through a legal process to defend their importation of those objects, or they can abandon it and let it go.
I got to know through the police that there were some documents, some receipts which was destined to Nimbus exports. So when the US customs official started probing into the case, they found this Nimbus exports is owned by a gallery owner, Subhash Kapoor.
So we began to understand that Subhash Kapoor was trafficking in looted antiquities. And we began working that investigation. And we did it the way you do every single investigation. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Subhash Kapoor is a longtime dealer. He owned a gallery here in New York, and he developed a pretty exceptional trade. Many people called him the dealer to the stars, and he was very good at what he did.
Kapoor was born in Delhi, and his father was an antiquities dealer. As a child, Kapoor was kidnapped. And in the incident, Kapoor's right ear was cut off and sent as proof of life to his father. So Kapoor left India in the 70s, moved to the United States with other members of his family, but carried with him this kind of scar from his childhood, which he felt disfigured him. He also carried with him his father's business in ancient objects. And so when he came to the United States, both he and his brother both started galleries in Manhattan, selling Indian antiquities and paintings to the Western art market.
I'm covering crime almost 3 decades now. So I have noticed a lot of criminals, they start their business legitimately, and then after a point they'll feel like they are the boss, and suddenly they emboldened to do whatever they want to do. He was legitimately selling some real antique pieces which was brought from his native town in Punjab. But after a while he started selling a couple of idols which was abandoned near the temple, and finally he thought we can go ahead with a larger network.
It was really not until the early 2000s that he became a prominent donor initially and later dealer to some of the leading museums in the United States and in the world. He donated a series of paintings to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. In 2009, they hosted a birthday party for him to celebrate his contributions, where a number of prominent curators and other guests attended.
Subhash Kapoor is a master salesman, definitely, because he started reading many books when he was in the US. So he learned a lot about the antiquities, and he became an expert in art. After a while, he started convincing people that the priceless antiquities are worth several millions.
And then he'd market these things in catalogs that he published every year, often, asking millions of dollars for these. Both private collectors and museums around the world would get these catalogs and then come to Kapoor's gallery in Manhattan. But the problem that dealers face when they get looted antiquities from the market is they need to create and invent some other story about how this object had come out of India. One of the more prominent objects was the dancing Shiva. This was acquired by the National Gallery of Australia for $5 million. Kapoor provided them with documents that suggested it was formerly in the private collection of a woman named Raj Magoob. When I started investigating it, I looked into Raj Magoob and discovered that she lived in a brownstone in Queens and was unlikely to have ever possessed the dancing Shiva, much less the $30 million of other art that had been associated with her. I also found that on Facebook she was friends with the Kapoor family, so she was likely a cutout. So Kapoor had used Raj Magoob and had used family members all to create false provenance for these objects that he was selling. I published pictures of the dancing Shiva as it had looked in the temple and then compared those to the object on display at the National Gallery of Australia. Vijay Kumar, he did a very close comparison of these two and was able to confirm that they were indeed a match. That evidence we thought was compelling enough to show that the ownership history that the museum had been provided by Kapoor was false and that this object had actually been stolen.
We helped the law enforcement in India. We worked with Jason to obtain photographs, and we were able to prove that it was the Sri Purandan Nataraja. When we provided the information to the then curator of the National Gallery of Australia, he said there are hundreds of bronzes. You guys don't know the difference. You can't tell one from another. But people do not realize that these bronzes are done by the lost wax method, which literally means that the mold has to be broken to reveal the metal icon, and the mold cannot be reused. So every Nataraja is indeed unique. And so we managed to provide conclusive evidence that could not be challenged in court, and there was no escape.
So another Lord Nataraja's dancing Shiva popped up in the Kapoor's gallery in Manhattan. An anonymous scholar, he raised the suspicion because it has an inscription which was made in Tamil on the base of the idol and should belong to a temple in Tamil Nadu, and he tipped off the Vijay Kumar.
The Shiva Nataraja and the Uma had inscribed bases. So it reads Sutta Balli in Tamil. We were searching everywhere for a temple or a village by name Suttavalli. So we couldn't match the temple because over 1,000 years the village name had changed. So this Va had become Ma. So the village today was known as Suttamalli. And because of this one alphabet change, we were stuck for almost 2 years. But now we know.
Police investigated in a reverse engineering process. So after they came to know that Sri Purandan and Suttamalli temples idols were stolen, they started probing it. And they started targeting the petty thieves involved in stealing smaller idols from smaller temples. And they found that a couple of idol thieves were in prison. And they gave some tip-off about 2 more petty thieves involved in this Sri Purandan and Suttamalli temple. They inquired them and they spilled the beans about the involvement of the key person, Sanjeevi Ashokan. So based on his confession, police established that Sanjeevi Ashokan played a pivotal role in Chennai based on the instructions of Kapoor, and to piece it together and to narrow down Kapoor to the temple thieves.
And when these 2 bronzes land up in Subhash's gallery, it was where we could connect all the dots.
Indian authorities arresting an American citizen in American soil is not possible. So they started looking into how to bring him back to get the stolen idols. That was the primary thing in the minds of the Indian authorities. So they were waiting for someone to open up from Kapoor's side, and they got a breakthrough also. It was actually Kapoor's ex-girlfriend, and the police got some bits and pieces, and finally they managed to apprehend Kapoor.
When you mix love and looted antiquities, things go wrong.
And that's the big breaking news. From rare artifacts to objects of the Harappan culture, as many as 300, believe it or not, have been seized by the US Immigration and Customs Department from arrested art dealer smuggler Subhash Kapoor. Now, many of these
Kapoor was arrested in 2011 while on a business trip in Germany on an Interpol red notice. And soon after, federal authorities descended on his gallery in Manhattan and his storage facilities and seized not just $100 million worth of looted antiquities, but also Kapoor's business records. His hard drive proved to be a key piece of evidence because his correspondence with traffickers really around Asia, across Cambodia, Afghanistan, Southeast Asia, and India, revealed his business dealings and how he'd sourced all these objects for decades. Operation Hidden Idol was the case name for Homeland Security investigation of Kapoor and his network.
We ultimately raided more than a dozen storage facilities in and around the New York area. We seized over 2,500 idols that he had hidden.
ICE put out a release after the Kapoor bust saying that this was the single biggest commodity trafficking case in the agency's history. This put antiquities trafficking on the map for law enforcement in a way that few cases had previously.
I think we've recovered only about 5% of what he has stolen, stashed, and sold. We are still looking for objects related to him. So Homeland Security is going after his storage locations, buyers, collectors, dealers, and we are continuing to see seizures happening. So Operation Hidden Idol is still ongoing.
61 வயதான சுபாஷ் கபூர் தற்போது புழல் மத்திய சிறையில் அடைபட்டு கிடந்தாலும் இவர்
So Subhash Kapoor is in prison in India. He has been convicted. My feeling back in 2011 was India had the greater harm. He pillaged them the most, and so they asked to prosecute him first. So I consented to that. I didn't know the trial itself in India would take more than 10 years. They have just concluded. He's been convicted of all charges, all counts in India. He has been sentenced, and now he's still in prison awaiting extradition. He is fighting extradition right now to the United States, but he will be prosecuted by this office for his crimes, truly for his crimes against humanity.
He completed 10 years in the first case of conviction. But in the remaining 7 cases, police are investigating, and if he is convicted, he should be in prison for 70 years almost. Once I met him in the prison, and he claimed that he was innocent, he was framed, he can be freed very soon. He didn't have any kind of grief or remorse for doing whatever happened. He was so arrogant to say that I have not stolen any valuables from India. It's all gifted to me. I didn't do anything.
For museums, the argument is that these idols and sculptures have a historic value and an academic value. So museums are the best places for these to be preserved. On the other side, the argument is that if they need to be preserved, they should be preserved within the community or close to the community.
I think we'll see an increase in restitutions in the coming years, but this is an enormous black market. And I think without citizen detectives like Vijay Kumar, without people in the Manhattan DA's office that took this seriously, Subhash Kapoor would most likely still continue doing this work today.
We are far from reaching the goal. Antiquities trafficking is still active all around the world. And Manhattan in particular continues to be a place where looted antiquities are bought and sold every day.
When I started this job, the only 2 questions that were ever asked by anybody in a museum or a collector or anyone about an antiquity was, how much does it cost and is it real? Those are 2 fair questions. Keep asking them. I just want a 3rd question. Is it legal? How did you get it? And the good news is they're starting to ask those questions because one pillaged idol is too many.